Well, hello everyone. I am Kevon Easley with Phi Beta Sigma, and welcome to tonight's virtual hour. Tonight we are going to be talking about sex and human trafficking. Now, before we start, I want to explain to everybody how in the world did we arrive at this subject? Well, a couple of community partners, as well as some of our fraternity brothers, were in conversation. And we were talking about all the things that was going on in the world, things we were aware about and things that we were not aware about. And one of the brothers by the name of Tony Gray spoke up and said something about the subject of sex and human trafficking. And so we stepped back and thought about things from education to bigger, better business to social justice issues. And we all came to the conclusion that, hey, none of us know a whole lot about sex trafficking and human trafficking. In fact, as we prepared for this, I tried my best to throw some knowledge, or at least what I thought was knowledge, and I found out that I did not know as much as I thought I knew. And so I have asked some friends to come along and to come and talk to us about this subject and prepare a presentation. So if you are around your loved ones, if you are around your children, if you're around family members and friends, I would ask you to please grab a hold of them, pull them close to you so that they can hear what we are going to be talking about tonight. This hits home for me. It hit home for me as a pastor. It certainly hits home for me as a father and as an educator, because I want to keep my family safe. I want to keep my community safe. And I know that you want to do the same thing too. But the best intervention out there is always going to be surrounded and rooted in education. So tonight we have a special group of people that is going to help us learn more about sex and human trafficking. That way, we can do a great job at continuing taking care of our community and advocating for one another. And so what I want to do is just kind of go down the list and say some names real quick. And once you hear your name, could you just wave at everybody and introduce yourself and tell us where you're from and a little bit about what you do. So let's start with Miss Catherine.
Good evening. I'll actually do a wave. I am Catherine Beto. Yeah, I got jokes. I am the grant coordinator for the human trafficking team with Transitions Family Violence Service. We are based out of Hampton, Virginia, and we work for areas between Hampton, Newport, here on the peninsula. We have community partners like Miss Courtney across the river on the south side that we work closely with. Transitions was started in 1972 and has worked with survivors on domestic violence, intimate partner violence, and now into the human trafficking side of things. And we provide counseling services for individuals, housing, employment services, court advocate, and legal justice supports. So yeah, we've got a whole team that we're ready to help survivors.
Awesome. Thank you, Miss Catherine, and thank you for joining our conversation tonight. Let's see here. We have Miss Courtney. Can you introduce yourself and tell us a little about what you do?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. My name is Courtney Pierce. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I'm the Anti-Trafficking Outreach and Direct Service Coordinator for Samaritan House. We are an agency that has been around for 36 years working with survivors of homelessness, domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking. Our human trafficking department came about in 2017 with the partnership of the Office of the Attorney General for the state of Virginia, as well as Homeland Security and local law enforcement. My position is where I'm able to do programmatic influence over our program to provide guidance and oversight, making sure that we're trauma responsive for the needs of our program participants, as well as to do outreach to our community, as well as those that are seeking additional knowledge of those that are working within the human services and social services field. So I'm excited to be here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being with us, Courtney. Next, we have joining us by phone is Miss Dee Dee Wallace. Miss Dee Dee Wallace, could you tell us where you're from and what you do, please? Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for inviting me for tonight. I work with the federal law enforcement agency, Homeland Security Investigations. I am the victim assistance specialist for them. I cover the local Hampton Roads area along with all of Virginia, West Virginia, and DC. My job basically is to be a bridge and to make sure that we stay in our investigation on the law enforcement side of things, that we are victim centered. And we carry it from the first time that we meet somebody to throughout the case, that we understand that the person is more important than the case, and that we do the best by them and we do less harm to them than what has already been done. And I, once again, thank you all for inviting me.
Thank you so much, Miss Dee Dee. It's always a pleasure to have you. Miss Ebony Velasquez, we have been talking back and forth for a little bit over a month now, and it is definitely good to see your smiling face. I'm going to turn things over to you so you can introduce yourself and go ahead and kick off our presentation. So thank you, Miss Velasquez. You have the floor.
Well, thank you for inviting us to be here today to talk to you about human trafficking. Once again, my name is Ebony Velasquez, and I am with the Office of the Attorney General. And I am the Hampton Roads Human Trafficking Task Force Coordinator for the task force. I work closely with all members of the task force and serve as the central source for the task force and their information. And so I'm just going to turn over to my presentation and kind of give you a quick overview of the task force and how the task force came to be. All right, are you all able to see the presentation? Okay, great. Like Courtney mentioned, our task force actually started back in October 2016. Together with the Virginia Office of the Attorney General, Samaritan House, the U.S. Attorney's Office of the Eastern District of Virginia, and Homeland Security Investigations, we all were able to secure a $1.4 million grant. And through that grant was able to help establish and operate the task force in conjunction with state, local, and federal law enforcement partners, as well as victim service providers. And so during that duration, we were able in October of 2020 to secure additional funding, continuation funding to assist the task force in continuing the operations and expanding the task force. And so with this new grant that we just received, we're able to really expand our victim services, which allowed us to also partner with transitions to give them, allow them to have the opportunity to get grant funding to expand their victim services and build out a HT unit as just like Samaritan House, and be able to expand those victim services that we definitely needed as we start to spread the message about human trafficking. We're able to expand into more jurisdictions with this funding and expand partnerships and collaborations. And we're also able to mentor and support developing task forces as they become developing not only in Virginia, but throughout the nation. And so current today, our lead task force members is the Virginia Office of the Attorney General, Homeland Security Investigations, U.S. Attorney's Office of the Eastern District, Samaritan House, as well as Transition Family Violence Services. And we work with several federal partners as well as local and state law enforcement, prosecutions, and victim service agencies throughout the area. And so just to give you a general idea of the victim services that we do provide for our victims, we provide intense case management, individual and group counseling, we connect our victims to substance abuse treatment, vocation, and academic advisement. So we help them if they want to further their education, we help them with that. Court advocacy, life skill coaching, community engagement, as well as children children's advocacy and rapid rehousing for those victims that have are now looking to live independently and live on their own. I also wanted to also give you a deeper look at what human trafficking really looks at, not just in Virginia, but throughout the nation. And so this is a 2019, which I believe is still the current heat map that is created by the National Human Trafficking Hotline. And the dark red areas indicate the highest number of human trafficking calls that they receive in those particular areas. And as you can see, it may be a little hard to see, but Virginia is right here, and Hampton Roads is right in that red spot. We are actually the second highest for human trafficking in the state of Virginia, with Northern Virginia being the first and Richmond being the third. So we do and understand the need that's going on here in the Hampton Roads area with human trafficking. And so why is it happening here? And so some of the factors that facilitate human trafficking in our area is definitely the interstate highways and accompanying facilities. So we have 95, 64 that run right through Virginia. We have our back highways, 55 and 13. We have, of course, 17. And so a lot of those highways and interstates that run through Virginia, they are prone to have human trafficking circuits that go all the way from you would say New York all the way down to Florida. And so we are right smack in the middle of all of that. We have easy high access to, like I said, human trafficking circuits. We have a large air and sea port. We have the third largest port in the in the East Coast. We have a large military presence, which really human which they cater to to the military. So you may see a lot of the strip clubs and things like that, massage parlors closer to military bases, and because they cater to those the military, with the military going in and out of ports and out of the area, they really cater to that. We have a large homeless and at-risk youth population. We have a high percentage of runaways and in this area, in the Hampton Roads area. And so those are vulnerabilities that traffickers prey on and look for. We have a large tourist location. We have Virginia Beach, Williamsburg, and then the J1 visa student program and migrant workers, especially on the Eastern Shore. We have the migrant workers on the Eastern Shore. And then we have, of course, the visa programs, especially during the tourist areas and locations where they will bring people in to work during those tourist seasons. So we are really an area that can facilitate human trafficking. And so I just wanted to quickly go over a few of some indicators, red flags that you might want to look for. One of the things that, some of the things that you might want to look for is not having control over their IDs or documents. A lot of the traffickers, that's a form of control. So if they're not able to provide those to you, or not or don't know where those documents are, something that is easily accessible, that's something that is a red sign. Few or no personal possessions. If you're under the age 18, providing commercial sex, that is definitely human trafficking. Okay. If you're under the age of 18, you do not have to prove the elements of human trafficking. It is automatically human trafficking under the federal definition. And so even for our labor trafficking cases, we also have that as well, where you work for little or no pay or no access to earnings. Physical abuse, lack of health, malnourishment. Sometimes, with the control of the trafficker, they're not able to get those things and those necessities that they need to keep up their health, or even be able to eat. And they one of the big things also is they can't speak for themselves. There's somebody always talking for them. They can't answer questions. There's somebody always by them or looking over their shoulder and hearing what they're saying. It sounds rehearsed. So these are just a few red flags and indicators, and we can talk more about that in more detail as the panel discussion goes on. But I just wanted to kind of emphasize a few of those red flags and indicators. And I also wanted to talk about ways that the community can engage. And one of the things that I think is very important is being able to listen to people's stories, taking away those biases and prejudgments when they're listening to people tell their stories, and don't judge them, and taking away those stigmas of being just a prostitute or you know, selling yourself for sex. And welcome a victim, welcome them, know that there's some trauma, there's something behind their story of where they got to where they are, um, and learn these warning signs. This is the first step of you all even being in on this panel discussion and listening to this panel discussion, is learning and understanding what human trafficking is so that you'll know what to look for. And always trust your instincts. That's one big thing. Trust your instincts. We always say it's best that you say something and you be wrong than you not to say anything and nothing can be done and we could have saved a victim. So go with your gut. We always want to make sure that we are we're able to look into any situation, whether it came out to not be a situation at all. And just be proactive. Make sure that you have these materials, awareness, posters posted up, know who to contact and where to contact, is ways that you can stay engaged in this. And I can also provide this information in the chat as well. But this is ways that you can definitely call in a tip, call the National Human Trafficking Hotline. Our Homeland Investigation has a tip line that we do investigate as well. So please feel free to and please feel free to be able to call these numbers. And if you have, if you know of a victim that needs some assistance or needs services, may not want to talk to the police right now, but needs some type of services and guidance, this is Samaritan House's information as well as transitions, and that they will be able to assist those victims if you call their hotline. All right. And I'll turn it
Outstanding.
back over to you.
Well, wow, that was an outstanding presentation. And I've got questions firing left and right now. And one of the things is you brought up how Hampton Roads is a hot spot for human trafficking. And just to reiterate, I heard you talk about the traffic pattern, in terms of our interstate, in terms of our being a town that brings in a lot of tourism. Um, but I also heard you bring up the military, and that's pretty profound to me because I would never expect that someone who wears the uniform would be a part of human trafficking. So my question for you all is, in your experience, have you dealt with a couple of service members in the military that have been trafficked or are traffickers?
Yes, unfortunately, this is Dee Dee. We have unfortunately encountered they're both the trafficker, they're the purchaser, the people we call the Johns in Hampton Roads. We have done multiple operations, police operations, and we've encountered military active duty members, which is heartbreaking to me. I'm an Army veteran, my husband's a retiree, and so is my grandfather and my father. So to think that my heroes have now become people that we're arresting, And we've also had unfortunate circumstances where, luckily, not in Hampton Roads, but in other places in the United States, where we've had active duty members who have abused their power and have sometimes blackmailed other service members to be put in that position, or they have recruited young people and have put them in the position. Now, there was a Navy officer, or not a Navy officer, but he was an active duty naval personnel, I think in 2012, that was arrested in Hampton Roads for prostituting sex trafficking. I prefer that one. Sex trafficking a minor out of, I think it was Oceania, but I can't remember. So unfortunately, that does occur down here.
Wow, you're right. That is unfortunate. So, are victims targeted, or is there something that the victim is doing wrong or should be doing? And I ask that question because historically, what I hear is some would say that a person should know how to protect themselves from this situation. In you all's experience, has that been the case?
I think that anybody could be a victim of any type of crime. I think that when you have a vulnerability and you have people who are looking for those vulnerabilities, those two, when they meet together, is the perfect storm. So it's not so much that somebody's putting themselves in harm's way. It's not so much that they're not understanding the situation. Sometimes they do, they really do, but they don't understand the complexity or the totality about what's about to happen to them. Say that you've been victimized all your life. You've been victimized by family members or by neighbors or something like that. And then somebody says to you, well, basically you've done this all your life, so you might as well make money from it. And there's nobody else in your life to support you. There's no anything else to have a fallback. So this person is offering you shelter and love, or food, or being able to get out of another bad situation. That seems at that moment a good idea to step forward and go into it without realizing what you're about ready to step into. So it's not a matter of people being able to be prepared for this. It's a matter of being vulnerable and having somebody else waiting to capture that vulnerability and then use it to their advantage.
And I'll also add in, if you want to look at it like national disasters, right? Because we don't, when you think of a national disaster, people are being displaced, right? They either lost their home, they can't work, and those are vulnerabilities that traffickers will play on, whether it's a labor trafficking or a sex trafficking situation. And it's not that they asked to be in that situation. A hurricane or a storm just tore down my house, and I have nowhere else to live. I have nowhere else to go. And so when they're looking for that help and assistance, you think that you're getting that help and assistance when you could be in a vulnerable situation where a trafficker will then take advantage of that. So, that's kind of like a situation that you would think of when it's not something that necessarily you would think would be in that place, in that situation, but that's what traffickers do.
Wow. This next question is for Miss Courtney, and it is, what should happen if one that's being trafficked approaches you in a public location such as a bathroom and wants to get away from the situation? What would you advise?
Sure. And before I start, I just want to say I'm pleasantly surprised to see Barry Dowdy on the line. Barry is a part of the reason why I do this work. Back when I graduated from college many moons ago, I couldn't find a job, and he assisted me in finding a job working at a Suffolk Redevelopment and Housing Authority. And his parents and his family have been very influential in my life. So I just want to say thank you, Barry. I appreciate you, and I appreciate your family. I would first say that when someone is approaching you, first and foremost, to make sure that you are safe. This goes back to the whole idea about being on an airplane, to put the mask on yourself first. So you want to make sure that you're safe. And then secondly, you want to be able to give that person local resources where they're at, so that you make sure that they are connected if they have any social capital. And thirdly, you want to make sure that you're listening empathetically to the person that is asking for certain things. So if someone comes up to you, try your best to fulfill what they're asking. And in that situation, reaching out for support via law enforcement if there is immediate danger as well.
And to piggyback off of that, Courtney, if you're approached once you're safe and the person's safe, and like Courtney stated, you're being empathetic and asking what it is the individual is needing from you or seeking from you. If all else fails, 911, and you can Google the hotline number for the national hotline number, and they can direct you to additional services from there as well.
Awesome. You know, part of my background is doing a lot of counseling. And I can remember at one point having to relocate my office because I realized it was too public. My door was near the front door. And what I was told by a more experienced counselor was, that's one of the main reasons why people don't come to counseling, because they don't want anybody to know that they're receiving counseling. So you may want to consider relocating to a more private location. And so for the services, the advocacy services that are out there for survivors, is there a way in which we need to advocate for someone who is currently being trafficked or at risk? Is it the same situation like counseling, where we really need to be on the private side of things?
Well, I can say, always feel free to reach out to us as well, if you have somebody that you feel is being trafficked, because we've had that situation where counselors have come to us, and what we would do is we would just really work with our victim service providers to either, if they're trying to get out of that situation, we have actual shelters just for our human trafficking victims that we can place our victims in. And so in that way that they can still feel safe, we would still work with you as the counselor to provide those services, since they have built that rapport with you, but also provide other wraparound services if need be, to make sure that they feel safe, that they feel that the trafficker is not going to get them, know where they are in those type of situations, and be able to stabilize the victims, because it's very rare where we'll get a victim that truly just says, hardly never, that says, I identify myself as a victim of human trafficking. And so they may not know the situation that they're technically in, but you as a counselor, by hearing some of these things and putting pieces of what they're saying together, will then help them say, you know what, I feel like there's something maybe going on. Let me reach out for that additional assistance. And so, like I said, they may think that it maybe just looks like a domestic violence situation or a sexual assault situation, but there's other pieces or components that can hint to a human trafficking situation. And then at that point, we can definitely help. But I'll turn it over to our victim service providers to have more information.
I was kind of waiting to see if Courtney, if you were going to jump in. I was like, watch. I was like, all right. So yeah, exactly what Ebony said. My background too is in counseling and mental health, as well as some criminal justice sections of probation and all. When you're meeting with a survivor, if you're, for example, doing a mental health screening and assessment, you're going to discuss trauma. You're going to discuss abuse, whether it's physical, emotional, sexual. Does that date back to childhood? You're going to address all of those things. So by learning more about human trafficking, what the components of human trafficking are, you're going to be able to, again, like Ebony stated, piece things together and ask more questions or reach out to one of us for additional resources and education and allow us to step in, and do a collaborative approach to work with that survivor to meet the best of their needs. And if they're still in that environment, if they're ready to relocate and leave that environment, again, we have those services. We have specific sites for our human trafficking survivors, and we're looking to expand those currently as well, here on the peninsula and on the south side. So there's definitely placement for those survivors, and again, just wraparound services.
So before we get to the question that we've got a Facebook question here. I wanted to grab a hold of something that stood out. You said collaborative services. When you say that, does that mean that a victim is victimized in every area of their life? Does this issue touch every area of life, or is it just an issue that we have to contend with emotionally? And I ask that question is because how does a family respond to their survivor?
So by collaborative approach, I mean that our court advocates, our survivor advocates, employment, housing, counseling, if child protective services are involved, if there's a requirement for intensive inpatient or intensive outpatient substance abuse, if our survivors are detoxing, if they need to attend or seek treatment from a Suboxone clinic, that collaboration between all of our partners. And as far as in a family environment, it depends on how it's presented. Some of our survivors have recently told me, my family doesn't know where I am. And we've discussed, well, is that a safety concern? Do you want that relationship? And they're like, one, for example, has stated, I don't want them to know where I am. I don't want them to know that has happened to me. We have a bad relationship, some of those things. Other survivors do have children, and there's child protective services that are involved in working towards reunification. So it's very much a case-by-case basis as to who is involved for each survivor, as their story and their experiences have been very different.
And I do have to say, it does touch every facet of their life. Because like I said, some of them are addicted to drugs, some of them are pregnant while addicted to drugs. So it also now affects their child, their children. And it does. And even when we do have minors that are victims of human trafficking, we have to involve the school, we have to involve FAP teams. Sometimes it's not where we can then place them back in the home because they may have been trafficked from a family member of the home or a guardian. And so now we have DSS that's involved and social workers that's involved. And so it's providing those multidisciplinary teams to provide these wraparound services for all of their needs that they need to get met.
Outstanding. Thank you for that answer. Let's look at our Facebook question. Very good question, one that makes me proud. And the question is this: how does one become an advocate?
I have a question for the question.
Okay.
At what level is someone looking to be an advocate? You can be an advocate and be a community partner and provide education, make materials available in your school, your neighborhood, library. If you're a business owner in your store, you can be an advocate and seek out support or being able to provide support to these survivors. If you are looking to be in a position, for example, with transitions, our survivor advocates, we have 2 at the moment on our human trafficking team, and both have bachelor's degrees. They have background in social work and counseling. One is bilingual, which is really great to have here on the peninsula. So it's what level you're looking to advocate on. If it's a community level, if you're hosting an event and you would like material, or transitions, for example, to come out and have a table set up now that we may go back into gatherings depending on how COVID goes. Those are things that are also available.
All right, I like that. It sounds like somebody has to decide whether they want to accept the challenge or not. Absolutely. I love the fact that there are different levels of advocacy. As we were talking, I thought of something. When I was in elementary school, we went on this youth trip, and one of the classes that we took was called Sex and Music. And what it did was it peeled back the layers of a particular act and how we could be sucked into it. And so I bring that up to kind of segue into this question. I all think that our community has become desensitized to human trafficking. And if so, is it an issue done through activity? Is it through music? We were talking about a famous hip hop song. And so let me hear from you all in terms of desensitization and how that may take place, if it does happen.
Well, it's definitely been glorified. If you look at it, because generally, when you think of a pimp, right, you don't associate the pimp and the trafficker. You associate the pimp with the guy with the cane, the hat, walking the street. You associate it with some of those songs like, where it's glorified, where I want to like pimp my ride, right? Where, oh, I'm pimping my ride to make it look better, to make it look flashy, right? They glorify it to make it look a certain way. And so the problem is getting people to realize that pimps are traffickers. and there's no certain look to it. It can be, like we said, the person in the military. It can be the high school cheerleader that's recruiting teammates on her high school team. It can look like the person next door to your house if you live in a well-to-do neighborhood or a low-income neighborhood. It's no look, it's no the idea of what we think a trafficker would look like. And so that's what I think we really want to get out there and have people understand, that it's not necessarily what you see in the movies or what you think of in a pimp in a song or those type of things. It can be anybody. A trafficker can be anybody.
Think, in addition, that the desensitization comes from the fact that this is just a very difficult subject to talk about. When we think about violence, particularly intimate partner violence, whether that's sexual assault or domestic violence or human trafficking, our communities are shrouded in guilt and shame. And so for so many of our victim/survivors, folks, it makes it very difficult to come forward because we're not good as a society at having difficult conversations. And one of my coworkers, Danny, always says that we can talk about anything, even difficult subjects, if we are able to talk about them respectfully. And so I think that this is an opportunity for us to talk about difficult subjects, but talk about it respectfully. And this is also a way that we're teaching those that are coming behind us what it looks like to have consensual, even conversations. And so for us as a community, it's about getting rid of the shame and getting rid of guilt around someone else harming us, and being able to share that with others so that we can be supported within community. And so for me, when I think about the desensitization, it just comes from the fact that these are extremely difficult conversations to have. And so if we as a society will do a better job at creating safe spaces with true empathetic listening for one another, that there will be a lot of disclosure that occurs, and then that journey towards support and healing can happen for a multitude of victimizations.
Oh, gotcha. See, I never would have thought about that. I clearly remember at one point walking into the kitchen in elementary school when I thought it was cool in the 90s. And I told my mama I'm a pimp. And she did not like that. And now I know why. So thank you so much for sharing that information. Here's another question, because in your response, I heard you talk about it can be anybody. Anybody can be the trafficker. And because and I would just assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, if anybody can be the trafficker, then that means that anybody can be the victim and anyone can become the survivor. And so let's talk about demographics real quick. What demographic is the most at risk for being trafficked, and why is that demographic at risk?
So as far as demographics, I've got some numbers for you. So as of 2018, for example, so a little bit dated because we're now in 2021, but 52% of the criminal human trafficking cases that were active were sex trafficking cases involving only children. And then out of that, 27% were identified to be under the age of 15. 60% of victims globally are female girls. So young girls that are identified as minors make up 2/3 of trafficked children, and young boys are about 10% of that population of children that are trafficked. So as far as gender, that's kind of where the numbers have shown us over the past few years. And then it goes back to the vulnerabilities too, as well, including low income, runaways within the foster care system, if they've aged out of the system, if there's any trauma, conflict, substance use within the home, and they've left that, or maybe they're considering leaving that environment, and this is for anyone of any age, and they're approached, or they encounter someone and that person's like, well, I'm not going to hit you, you can come stay with me, or you're struggling with this, I can provide you with these resources. So those vulnerable populations that Ebony mentioned earlier on.
Has the pandemic affected the statistics for human trafficking?
I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry.
In terms of us investigating, we have seen an increase in our minor cases during the pandemic, and what we call familial trafficking. So family members trafficking other family members. But has the pandemic slowed trafficking down? No. We still see the numbers. Is just a different demographic of what we're mostly seeing, which we've seen a very high intake of our minor cases of trafficking.
And so, for example, human trafficking is $150 billion kind of industry, as far as the illegal profits that are seen, and that grows exponentially every year. And this is from Catholic Relief Services from 2021. So within the pandemic, like Ebony said, familial trafficking has increased. You're taking people and you're isolating them, where you're going to have tension, you're going to have limited resources because they're not going to be able to get out, and they haven't been able to get out and do as much. So you're going to take stress, tension, trauma, mental health, low substances, work strain, the education system. I'm a parent, so having to manage work and family life alone on any given day is stressful when you factor in a pandemic. And now my kids can't go to school or to daycare, but I still have to work. And those are going to expand a lot of things that may have been previously under the surface.
I can speak directly to Samaritan House's statistics. I often just try to bring it home with some domestic stats. And our department saw a 30% increase. And when we talk about what it looks like, did the pandemic increase, what I think the other panel guests will also say, that it's not necessarily an increase, but an uncovering of what is already occurring. So we had an uncovering of additional labor trafficking survivors that were brought to us through Partnerships for Justice for You from the Eastern Shore area. And we saw a 30% increase overall for those that were seeking services within the anti-trafficking department. And so I think that the pandemic exacerbated what was already there, or uncovered things that were already occurring.
So you said labor trafficking. And so, okay, so what I'm hearing is there's two different types of trafficking. And again, you got to educate me. Is it sex trafficking and labor trafficking are the same thing? Are they two different things?
They are two different things. Sex trafficking is commercial sex, and labor trafficking is the act of the labor, like it could be working in a nursing home, it could be agriculture, it could be a nanny, pretty much anything that you would consider like labor, a job type of situation. And while there is some overlay, because unfortunately we've had labor trafficking cases where the victims have been sexually assaulted or sex trafficking has occurred during the course of the labor trafficking, they are considered two separate ones. In the state of Virginia, unfortunately, we don't have state law for labor trafficking cases. We have some other good laws that we can use, but federally in Virginia only we can look at a labor trafficking case and classify it as such. But Virginia and the feds have us. We have the same to look at for a sex trafficking case, and our language is very similar.
And
Yeah,
to
thank you.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Courtney.
I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you so much, Dee Dee, for sharing that, because I think oftentimes when we think about human trafficking, we only think about sex trafficking, but really labor is a part of that as well. And sex is labor. So really it can be classified as that as well. And so we actually, through our partnership with Office of the Attorney General and local law enforcement, were able to serve as program participants that were, there were 4 massage parlors that were shut down in the city of Virginia Beach about a year and a half ago. And they were both an amalgamation of those victimizations. So they were both labor and sex trafficking, because they were actually doing labor, giving massages, but also forced into commercial sex acts. So labor trafficking is here and it is real. And it, again, sometimes doesn't get the attention at sex trafficking, but there is both labor and sex trafficking here in our area.
And so to piggyback off of Dee and Courtney, and to give a little bit more of a definition. So human trafficking, the components of that are fraud, coercion, and force. And there are different types. So again, sex trafficking, labor trafficking, and then different pieces within that. So sex trafficking can include escort services, like illicit massage services, like Courtney mentioned, that were shut down in the Virginia Beach area, residential brothels, pornography production, amateur porn, bands only. Those are all considered to be part of sex trafficking, personal sexual servitude, and then you have pimp controlled, familial controlled, individual sex trafficking, or gang controlled sex trafficking. And then within labor trafficking, it's things such as domestic work, restaurant work, beauty services, construction, landscaping, manufacturing, and then again, the criminal endeavors and gang affiliation as well.
Oh. Man, as you went down that list just now of different work environments, I started thinking about my students and my daughters. What do we tell our family members that we have positive influence over? Virginia is comprised of a large college and university system, a lot of schools, a lot of males and females going away from home for the first time, walking across the street, catching public transportation, getting in an Uber car with somebody that they don't know. What do we tell them? How does that conversation happen? And I think, Ebony, I think at one point we were talking about if this were high school students, the presentation would be different.
Yeah, especially when it comes to the youth, it's not more of a presentation, it's more of a discussion. And we want to talk about healthy relationships, right? They're just getting into dating, what that looks like. And if they don't have those examples or know what those healthy relationships look like, they can be easily vulnerable to a trafficking situation. We definitely want them to understand social media a lot better, know what goes on and how to detect things on social media, keep their social media private, and things like that. Knowing who their true friends are on social media, and because it's easily you can have a fake profile and say that this is somebody that you think it is, but it not necessarily may be. They're trying to get information, they're trying to gain your trust. um, Trafficking is a luring of a victim. And so they try to get you to really know them, befriend them, trust them. And so, knowing those healthy relationships, knowing how that looks, knowing what to do and what not to do on social media, protecting themselves on social media, and really engaging with, if you're a parent and you're really having some type of concerns, engaging with your child, knowing if attitudes or moods are changing, what's going on in your child. Don't be afraid to look at social media. Don't be afraid to get on their computer and in their phones and who they're texting, and be able to be in their business. Especially, and then we also talk about gaming as well. Who they're playing with on these gaming sites and chatting with on the gaming sites and things like that. Being aware of those things and having those, and being able to have an open conversation and not judging your child when they come to you with things, thoughts, maybe some of the things that they're seeing or hearing at school, and being able to have those open and honest discussions will really help when communicating, especially with the minors.
Hmm. I like that. I appreciate that answer. Taking it a little bit further in terms of protecting our future, which I think the number one resource is always human resource. There, ergo, our future, our youth. When I was first, entrenched in understanding sex trafficking and human trafficking, I had in my mind what I saw on TV from Law and Order, SVU. That was my introduction to it. And what I kept seeing, and let me know if I'm wrong, what I kept seeing was the white van situation where the white van pulls up, grabs the person, throws the person in the van, and boom, we've got a sex trafficking situation. Um, and we may have talked about it a little bit before, but as we come to our final 10 minutes, is that what it looks like? Is that always how it happens?
No,
No, I would.
sir, it's not. Oh, I'm sorry. I will tell you from a law enforcement perspective, and we are a international law enforcement at times. Those type of cases, it when they happen, is so rare. You have to understand they don't need to kidnap people when they can simply coerce them into voluntarily coming to them. They convince them to be in a relationship. It's a family member who could force them into doing it in order to have a place to live. It could be a mom who sets the daughter up on dates. Um, we don't see kidnappings. We've had in the Hampton Roads area one case where young ladies were abducted, and they were put into a hotel room. But that's like one out of like all the ones that we've looked at. Um, I think the problem is when we're talking about human trafficking, is that people have seen the sensationalism that goes on in Hollywood, and that means that we stop seeing really what's occurring in our neighborhoods and really what these cases look like. I've had the privilege of working on these type of cases for law enforcement since 2013, and I won't say all of them are alike, but a lot of them have similar traits, and they're not overt like that, and that makes it so much harder on us because it's more of somebody sending somebody on Instagram or on Facebook or on other ways of people that they already know, or they're aware of. Maybe they're legally doing things in order to stay afloat or to do things for their family. So they'll contact them and tell them that they have a job or they have a way for them to pay for their family's needs. They don't need to kidnap. It's not somebody in Walmart that's following a mom and kids. That's probably a pedophile because they are doing that. They're not putting things on people's antennas to say that they're picking somebody out. They don't have to, when all they have to do is send a message out, and if somebody responds, they can tell them an address and people show up. They're not following people in cars and grabbing them and throwing them in that white panel van. It's sadly, they don't need to, because they can simply go to a mall before COVID, right? And right now we have all these young people that are online, and we have stressed out families, and we have stressed out kids that are living their lives online, and they get messages and they respond to them, and then they enter into a relationship, they believe, and the person says to them, hey, you already know me, trust me, let's go do this. It's way more insidious than that white van.
And to add on to that, Dee Dee, and I'm trying to be conscious of time, I know Courtney was going to comment as well. Oh, so there are documentaries. I won't name them because they can also give ideas of how people can enter this realm of work and the industry of being a trafficker and being the one causing the harm to the survivors. But there are things on Craigslist and again OnlyFans, for example, and they put out things similar to, hey, do you want a trip to this location? Well, come down here, be a model, and then you get there and you're in a different situation, but you're already there, and they're giving you housing and they're giving you food and they're supporting you and they're going to help you start your modeling career, and they're pulling on those strings of maybe low self-esteem, mental health. I have a traumatic situation I'm trying to leave. I want bigger and better for myself. And once they get there, they are in these situations. But that there are documentaries out there. There are stories from survivors, so opportunities to learn from those survivors about how they ended up in a situation where they were trafficked, what that looked like for them, and then how they came out of it.
Wow. This has been amazing. This has really been an informative conversation. I've learned a lot of things tonight that I did not know a couple of hours ago. Panel guests, if you could, with our last few minutes, let's go one by one, and I would just like to hear just your final advice, your final words of wisdom. That you could give to us from all of your experience. What would it be?
Well, I'll start. My final advice would definitely be is get to know and understand what human trafficking looks like in your area. Because what you may see maybe on the news in Las Vegas or somewhere else is not necessarily how human trafficking is here in our area. And the only way that you can be aware and know what's going on in your area is to know how it looks in your area. So this is definitely a first step, and please feel free to reach out if you want to know more information. But get to know what human trafficking really looks like in your area, and how to recognize the signs in your area.
Thank you so much, Ms. Emily.
I would say, from my perspective as being a victim assistance specialist, I want anybody out there that this has happened to them or family members to understand that when the media says broken, they're wrong. people that have gone through this, both males and females and our LGBTQ members, you're not broken. You're recovering, and it takes time, and you can't self-hate. You have to understand that there's people that are out there for you. And I think that that's a big thing that people need to understand, is that it's not, a lot of people put shame on this, and a lot of people have bias toward it. And in order for us to assist the victims, is that we need them to understand that that bias is there, but we see past it, and we see you, and we see you as a survivor.
Wow. Thank you so much, Dee, for those words.
All right, I'll take the spot. So my kind of final piece for the night is similar to what Ebony and Dee Dee said. Educate yourselves, ask questions, be open-minded, be supportive, and be empathetic whenever you are in any situation. You don't know what other people are experiencing or have experienced. Also, don't be afraid to ask questions. And if you aren't sure how to ask the question, we urge some of the few resources, there are others as well, that can help you learn the language and how to approach someone and have a conversation that may be uncomfortable and is going to be uncomfortable, but your willingness to have that conversation, to put yourself out there, is going to create a space for an individual to then in turn open up to you as well.
Thank you so much, Catherine.
And I would say the same thing as Catherine and all the other panel guests, is to be empathetic, which really means to be with people, to be with marginalized community members, and be an active listener. Really listen to what people are saying, be kind to one another, because oftentimes in conversation, once people feel safe, they're able to disclose and to share. And then from that sharing, they're able to seek assistance. So be with one another, be empathetic, and be kind.
Wow. Thank you. Those are all great words of wisdom for us all to adhere to tonight. To the guests, thank you so much for taking the time out to be with us regarding this very, very important topic. I would hope that you all have a great, great evening. Again, thank you so much for being with us. Everyone else, please take this subject serious and share it with your family members, share it with your friends, share it with your colleagues, because this is happening right in our backyard. And sometimes, a lot of times, we don't even know it. So help us spread the word to take sex and labor trafficking, human trafficking, more important. Again, to the panelists, thank you so much. We appreciate your time, your efforts, your words of wisdom. Have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you all and have a great night.
Thank you.